Chapter 154. Becoming a part of Apex's sky traffic was every bit as entertaining as Alden had imagined it would be. The mother-forsaken cookie was soaring along at what he felt was the perfect altitude for a classy magical vehicle, above most of the spell users and the shapers riding around on recliners with homemade seatbelts installed, but below the super fast or noisy stuff. It's the perfect ride, he thought. Quiet, hovers, big enough for company. And it looked cool. He was currently trying to convince himself that the Nonagon's coolness was the attraction whenever he noticed people down below pointing or holding up tablets and cell phones. At least drones aren't getting in our way. There were separate rules for how the drones flew around up here where people were also flying around. Maybe those rules were keeping them in line. Or maybe his companion was just the sort of person that even the most entitled Geckers knew to keep a respectful distance from. Eshurti, ultra-powerful chaos-fighting knight, had squawked himself over to the edge so that he could swing his feet, point eyes and hands in two different directions at all times, and comment on the things he found interesting. That person has awful technique. I hope it's their own fault and not a result of bad talent design. There are so many types of dogs. Look, that's a pull-me-over spell. What kind of game is played on that outdoor gaming board greater than? Alden peered down through the transparent surface of the Nonagon. Tennis, he said, spotting the court on a rooftop. You hit balls with stiff nets on sticks. Rackets wasn't in his Artonan repertoire. Eshurti nodded, then he moved right along to the next curiosity. They've built their own flyer out of mover discs. At the name of the familiar devices, Alden looked around again, searching for anyone that might be using them. The area they were passing over was mostly unharmed, but some isolated patches had experienced flooding. On the street immediately below them, waterlogged and damaged possessions were being piled in front of buildings. And there, flying at roof level along that street, was a yellow two-seater car, covered in mover discs that looked identical to the ones Alden had learned to control as the Lebanon Sidran flag was flapping on the car's roof, and there was some kind of a banner hanging from the trunk. Alden couldn't read it, but when he focused, the driver's public name tag came up on his interface. Right now, his or her name was listed as Seasway with stress-relieving altars offering flights between F and Apex. Plus heavy lifting. 900 ARG/hour. That's so expensive. It's probably one of the cheaper ways of making your own flyer if you can't cast spells, said Eshurti. But I wonder if they know how quickly those discs burn out. They are going to have to keep applying new ones. Alden had meant the hourly rate the Sway was charging for their variety of services, but that was interesting. I used mover discs to flip a car that had overturned on Thegund. There were lots of them at the laboratory, but almost none of them worked. I thought they were chaos damaged. I'm sure they were, said Eshurti. But they are not stalwart greater than tools at the best of times. Traditional enchanters get so offended by the quantity and quality of products that come from Fituna repeaters greater than. Alden took one more look at the car. Cheap flotation enchantments would be fun to practice a skill on even if they were flimsy. Mental note, find, price, and experiment on some of those discs. He wondered if mental notes could find room to stick in his head. Now that they were actually in the city, a frantic damage control program was running in the background, slightly dimming his enjoyment of the flight and scrambling his thoughts. If someone tried to read his mind, they'd get no secrets about Matadero. Instead, they could have his stream of consciousness. The Nonagon is so much better than that guy's ride. I wonder if I can find somewhere empty on campus so nobody sees me land. I bet I'm on the internet again. Yuck. Maybe they're all too focused on Eshurti to wonder why I'm here. He'd probably like horses. Knights and horses are a natural combo. How am I going to explain this to everyone at school so that they are less weird about it? I'm getting so much better at maneuvering. I know I can do a loop-the-loop with this thing. He tried to rein it all in. They were getting close to campus. Thank you for teaching me to fly. I needed it this morning. It's really fun. The nine-edged son whose own mother forsakes him is fun. It had been several minutes since they'd worked the name into the conversation. The nine-edged son whose own mother forsakes him is very fun, Alden agreed. Escherty made a pleased trill of a noise that most humans would have struggled to mimic. I've enjoyed the chance to see you learn. Even if it is only a small thing I've taught. He sounds like he means that. Joe always seemed to enjoy teaching me, too. It was just a thought that struck him, not an intentional comparison of the two situations. But intentional or not, once it had appeared, there was a part of Alden that had to chew on it. I was an unusually likable young person who Joe looked forward to summoning in the future for mutual benefit. It wasn't that different from how Alden would have described his relationship with the professor on the day he left Leaf Song for the last time. But after everything that had happened to him in Joe's former home, because Joe had sent him there, because Alden had tried his best to help Joe's people. "The little girl I lived with on Thagund is thinking of taking a morning name," said Alden. "She's been trying to build her bravery for it for a long time. I'm sure she'll decide to do it soon." Escherty lowered his arms and pulled his legs up before turning around to face Alden. He waited. "I know a lot of the things I'm supposed to do to show her I respect her decision and the new name. Everything I could find on Earth's internet and from the Good Child Clepak shows. But I had some questions, and I wanted to make sure I met the occasion perfectly. Can't I ask you for advice about it sometime?" "Of course," said Escherty. "There are many different traditions you might observe for the child. Most of them are quite beautiful. It would be my privilege to share them." "I appreciate it. Do you still speak to her often?" Escherty asked. "Yes. She's living with HNT on H for now. She's joined the wizard class and begun her education with tutors. We send each other messages every week. A class shift and a morning name all in the aftermath greater than of a corruption incident. She's having a turbulent greater than flight for a little T. Hey. Thought Alden. He called her a little T. The lesson from second grade about Artonans thinking they were cute enough animals to be a term of endearment was right. "I look forward to teaching you again," said Escherty. "And I look forward to giving you a campus tour whenever you have time for one," said Alden. Line of asterisks. As they approached the school, Alden settled on Chelena Circle as his stopping spot. He intended to land in the large green space, pass the ring over to Escherty so the knight could go about his day, and then make a run for the Majiffy Z building. The assembly was being held in the gym, and he decided to courageously admit to himself that there was no point in hunting for an isolated location to disembark from his noteworthy ride. Sneaking around might make Alden's interaction with people more manageable this morning, but since he had promised the knight a tour at an unspecified future date, there was ultimately no escaping from whatever kind of attention-wandering campus with an important Artonan was going to get him. He'd only be delaying the reactions. And, anyway, Escherty deserved better. HNT on Escherty, thank you for everything. I swear I'm not hiding you behind these garbage bins. I just wanted to show you I've outdo the recycling. But there was also no reason to drop the nonagon down directly into the crowd that would be heading into the gym. If I do that, I might as well just throw my arms into the air and shout, 'Behold! I have found myself in yet another unusual situation.'" Chelena Circle was close enough to his destination, and it shouldn't be crowded if all the students were gathering elsewhere. At least, that was what he'd assumed until he saw it. "There are domes," said Alden, staring down at the circle in surprise. The domes are new. Emergency houses that looked like many versions of Alisart's H's travel dome had appeared, forming an instant neighborhood. They were arrayed in curves, covering the grass. Quite a few people were moving around in the area. "I'll set us down somewhere. This is convenient," Escherty said. "Drusy has stationed greater than herself here. I should greet her in person." Alden had been about to say he should set the nonagon down somewhere else. But okay. He aimed for the sidewalk on the edge of the emergency housing and lowered them toward it. "Who is Drusy?" There were a couple of Artonans visible, unpacking what looked like another dome on the far curve of the circle. "She's a Vitari greater than to Lindata. And she's also her cousin." Drusiada. Alden just hated it when the system translated a word he didn't know with another word he didn't know. He'd have to find the definition when he wasn't listening, landing, and looking through the platform to make sure none of the people who were staring up at them were actually going to run over and try to say hi. I bet they revoke my special circumstances license if I set the cookie down on top of somebody's head. Drusy arrived in the night, said Ashurti. She will monitor greater than any Artonans who approach you. To ensure Bashnor doesn't send anyone to pester you or question you. He shouldn't, since I've told him not to, and I've already spread your account of events to important ears. At the moment he doesn't seem inclined to behave inappropriately. She's a bodyguard for me? Alden asked in English. I should have asked more questions about what he meant when he said someone would keep an eye and a mind on me until he was sure Bashnor was going to leave me out of his drama. Was Lindada's cousin another night? Was she going to stand 6 inches away from Alden, looming over his shoulder all day? She won't interfere with your schooling, said Ashurti. She's one of those Vitaries who takes pride in remaining in the shadow greater than. Does Vitari mean assassin? He looked around for an Artonan who looked like an assassin. He didn't see one. But I wouldn't if she was a good assassin, would I? The Nonagon stopped and hovered a couple of feet above the sidewalk. Everyone Alden saw was staring their way, but nobody approached. He held back a sigh, hopped off the platform, and removed the ring. He held it out toward Ashurti. Keep it for now, Ashurti said. Use it to travel wherever you like. Alden looked from him to the ring, surprised. I'll be fine without it. Don't you need it? You're already granting me your patience by agreeing to remain at the cube for a few more days while I take my time handling all the matters that might trouble you and Zoraida and single quote H in the future. So he's thinking it's going to be a few days then? Alden hadn't minded much when Ashurti had asked him if he would stay at Matadero a while longer. Healing, a private and quiet room, no human authorities bothering him for details about dead Avowed, and no ambassadors trying to trick him into incriminating assistants they didn't like. It wasn't a bad situation for him. But now that his feet were on campus, just a quick walk from Garden Hall, he craved his dorm room. Ashurti went on, while you can be here, and while I'm confident you are watched by the contract and a competent Vitari, it totally means assassin. I hope you will relax and freely take care of whatever matters need your attention. Go back to the cube when you want to, or wait for Drusiada or me to tell you it's time. Until then, enjoy your school. If your meeting finishes early, have fun flying on the nine-edged sun whose own mother forsakes him. He smiled. Don't crash it into anything. It will make me feel like an unworthy instructor. And then, before Alden could think of a reason why he shouldn't be given free use of the Nonagon, Ashurti was walking away. Alden stared down at the flying platform, feeling torn. He absolutely wanted to play with it more. But still. I thought I was going to hand you over to him after we parked, he said. If he's giving you to me for the whole day, what do I do with you? Even if he knew how to fly it, he didn't have any idea how to store it. It didn't feel right to leave it here at ground level where anyone could mess with it. I guess it comes with me instead? Why did I waste so much energy worrying about subtlety? He sat back down on the edge of the platform, and directed it to lift him just high enough off the pavement so that his feet wouldn't drag. Let's go to school. He started to zip off toward the MPE building, then stopped as he realized he might be leaving his bodyguard behind. Drusiada? Are you there? He asked in Artonan. Do you want to ride with me? He waited. About 10 seconds later, a whisper carried toward him by a spell, said, I will watch over you in my own way. Live as though I do not. Alden searched for her everywhere. No deadly-looking Artonans were in sight. I will try to do that, he said finally. Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. On the walkway outside the MPE building, a group of first-year Hero Program students were dawdling and taking advantage of the last minute before the assembly began to share gossip and disaster stories. You guys. Rebecca called, spotting them from a distance and joining them in 2 big bounds that landed her right beside Astrid. who was using a compact mirror to watch her eyebrows as she tried to morph them into matching arches. "Guess what I saw on my way over? I'll give you a hint. It was big and green and up in the air, the top of a cedar tree," said Jupiter, making a kudzu leaf float between one hand and the other. "A dirigible. A gokarachi. A grasshopper that got upgraded like big snake's wolves," said Astrid. "A cloud of smoke from Boomtown," said Everly. There was a pause as Rebecca looked expectantly at the others who were present. Mehdi, Con, and Fabri were all moving their fingers through the air while they discussed the videos they were sharing through their interfaces. "Are they ever going to tell us who did it?" "They've had all weekend," Fabri was saying. "They've only had a weekend," Astrid countered. "I'm surprised I managed to get back to Apex. Everything is so crazy." "It was members of Superhumans at Large," said Everly. "That's what everyone seems to think. They were probably trying to make the island uninhabitable so we'd have to be at large, too," said Jupiter. "I'm mad at them. My uncle's house is gone. And the Nilama building. Constantine, I'm so upset about the Nilama building." Mehdi frowned at her. "Him, too, since he lived there." "It's not gone. We could still live there," Khan said. Then he made a face as the word "there" came out sounding wrong. "There. Dear. That's getting worse every time you try it," Mehdi told him. "It's cute," Everly said. "He has his first superhero injury." Khan grinned to show off the gap in his teeth. "Like I was saying, we could still live there. The building is standing. It just got really wet. They don't need to condemn it. They won't. They shouldn't." "I can't believe Paragon is gone," said Everly. "I saw my old desk from 5th grade on the news. It was upside down in a cafe." "How did you recognize your 5th grade desk?" Mehdi asked. "She and Kant went to rich people's school," said Astrid. "They probably had special desks." Everly rolled her eyes. "Yes. I recognized it because it was covered in rubies. Not because I drew a snowflake on the bottom with a paint pen." "You guys." Rebecca's voice was exasperated. "Sorry," Astrid exclaimed. "Becca saw something." "What was it?" "One of the wizard generals. I was running past Chill in a circle, and I saw them landing." "Really? Which one?" Mehdi took an eager step toward her. "The green flying thing belongs to the male one." Jupiter tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear and tried to position the kudzu leaf to go with it. "The real general. Not the bald one. Eshirti." "Why do you know that off the top of your head?" Fabri asked. "If I see an important Artonan and they're friendly, I want to ask them what kinds of extraterrestrial plants are good for battling demons," said Jupiter. "And if I can have some." "Just put yourself out there like that then," Fabri replied in a shocked voice. "You can't do that, Jupiter," said Everly. "If they're generals and they help with Matadero, then they're the ones who probably summon a vow for the most dangerous missions. What if they think you're volunteering or something?" Jupiter shrugged. "Rebecca, are you sure?" Astrid asked. "What was one of those people doing on campus? Was he going to cast some spells on the domes?" "Maybe he is hunting for the terrorists who did this," Mehdi suggested. "One of them could be hiding in the dome village." "Why do you sound so excited about that?" asked Astrid. "I'm not." "You sound like you are." "I'm not. I thought the people responsible were supposed to have died when they tried to attack the cube," said Rebecca. "There could be accomplices," Mehdi said. Their conversation broke off as a blonde speedster in sunglasses shot by them, running for the double doors that led into the building. A fraction of a second later, another figure blazed past the first and stopped with pinpoint precision in front of the doors just in time to open them before the other boy arrived. Finley gave Winston a sarcastic bow. "That seems to have escalated," Everly muttered. They all watched Winston bristle then take off, heading around the building for the back entrance instead. "Now that whatever that was is over," said Rebecca, once the speedsters were gone. "I don't think the general would be looking for terrorists. He had a student with him. In our uniform. Maybe they assigned somebody to show him around," Astrid suggested. Maybe he summoned a Chilena North student to be his personal avowed helper, said Medi. Whoever it is will probably get so much Argold. Even more than Jeffy. Everly shook her head. What kind of help do you think a wizard that powerful needs from a student? A translator in case he doesn't like the ones the system gives. Or maybe it's someone really gifted and he's taking an interest and giving them some extra stuff, Medi said, his enthusiasm growing. Like special instruction? Asked Fibri. Or special plans, said Jupiter. Or a spell impression nobody else has access to, said Medi. Or maybe the student is Alden Thorn. Kine swiped his system windows away and fixed his eyes over Rebecca's shoulder. And we can just ask him. Medi snorted. Good one. Even generals probably need rabbits for. Oh. You meant. Fibri stood on his tiptoes, his eyebrows lifting. Khan glanced at Medi. I don't know what you were about to say, but I think it's lucky you stopped. It wasn't anything bad, Medi grumbled. The girls all turned to see where the boys were looking. A green flying platform was heading toward them. Alden Thorne rode on the front of it, one hand extended as if to direct it, the other rummaging through his messenger bag. Rebecca, you didn't recognize Alden? Everly gasped. Was he really far away when you saw him? No. Rebecca's face turned embarrassed. But he doesn't ever wear the school uniform. He looks different. Astrid was laughing. I associate him with brown hoodies, green plaid, and radishes, murmured Jupiter. Keep this safe for me. I'm going to ask him about the general. She thrust her leaf in Everly's face. Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. Thanks to this bunch I'm now late, Alden thought, watching his classmates poke, stroke, and take pictures with the Nonagon. Fortunately, a lot of other people seemed to be late, too. Students were still dashing toward the gym, and with everything being so out of the ordinary, he thought there was a good chance the school had planned for a delayed start. But he would have hurried inside if this group hadn't surrounded him and lost their minds. Alden had gotten hit with the obvious question right off the bat, from Jupiter, why do you have General Escherdy's flying platform? Before the whole sentence had escaped from her mouth, the others had raced over to join them. Because I've been with a healer friend of his. Alden had pointed at his boot for proof of injury. He didn't want me to miss school. I guess he didn't want me working around on the hurt foot, and he was being kind. So. He'd braced for follow-up questions that would have dramatic answers. How did you get hurt? Where exactly were you staying all weekend? Why was a general involved at all? But he should have realized that his broken bones and living arrangements weren't the most interesting thing he had going on. How fast does it go? Fibri asked. Is it hard to fly? Asked Everly. I want to touch it, said Astrid. Can't I touch it? Medi was already tapping on the edge of it with the tip of a single pinky, jerking his hand back as soon as he made contact as if he was afraid it might burn him. That would be fine, Alden said. Don't try to hit it or anything. Maybe after the assembly, you can. As soon as he said fine, they were all over it, and all the questions turned into, how fast? How high? How long do we get to keep it? What do you mean we? And I'm probably just going to have it for today, said Alden. He was relieved he'd misjudged their priorities. If the flying Nonagon itself was going to be more exciting than the details of how he came to be in a situation where he needed and could obtain a magical vehicle, then that would make navigating conversations easier. And we've got a meeting to go to, he added. Kine slid off the platform and stepped over to stand beside Alden while he sent the Nonagon toward a place he thought seemed relatively safe, up high and as flat against the wall of the building as he could get it. It's so much harder to direct from the ground. What if it turns off? Kine asked, gazing up at it. Will it fall and break? His voice sounded different thanks to the missing teeth. He also had a giant gap. It looked so much bigger now, in daylight, when they weren't all scared of dying. Sorry, man. I think its default state does is floating a few feet in the air. You don't know. Medi said. Do I look like I fly one of these every day? I just used it for the first time half an hour ago. I bet I could fly, Medi started, Tiana assured he doesn't want me to loan the ring to anyone else, Alden said quickly. He didn't know if that was true or not, but he was going to operate as if it was a hard rule. The last thing he needed was some adrenaline-hungry idiot trying to levitate themselves into the stratosphere on it. They headed for the doors in a loose pack. Astrid was so busy staring at the nonagon that she almost tripped. "What happened to your leg?" Khan asked Alden. "Will it be okay?" "Yeah. It will. Some of the sinker center stuff grabbed onto my shoe and yanked my foot out from under me. Tore up my ankle. Plus the broken toes I got from kicking a guy." "Oh," said Khan. "You didn't look hurt on the bridge." Mehdi had spun to walk backwards as he talked. "It makes sense you got teleported out earlier than the rest of us if you were." "Oh. What a great excuse that would have been. Why didn't I think of that myself?" He was sure that during his texting spree yesterday he'd already given too much information to too many people, implying or saying outright that he'd been injured after evac, to rely on that misconception. "It was after the bridge," Alden said as they entered the building. Before any of them could ask anything else, he dug a tiny blue paper envelope out of his bag and handed it to Constantine. Khan opened it and laughed as he dumped his 2 front teeth into his palm. "Oh. You shouldn't have. I am sorry. It's fine. Lexi forced you to take my incisors like they ought to be your top priority in a disaster. When we couldn't find you the next day, I assumed you had your own problems to deal with and they were goners." He stuck his tongue through the gap. "Even if you'd kept them somehow, healers are so busy they're not handling minor stuff yet." He held up the envelope. "Did you make this yourself?" "I'm learning origami." Khan dropped his teeth back into it. "Maybe the right healer can still do something with them. Thanks for bringing them back. You don't happen to know what tree was the first to cast its shade over your face when you were a baby, do you?" Alden asked. Khan blinked several times then tilted his head. "No. But there's a good chance it got destroyed by the floods." "Why would you ask that?" Line of asterisks. The gym was filled with students from all 3 high school programs, and people were still wandering the bleachers in search of friends. Despite projection screens hovering over the floor with the words, "Please find your seats quickly," on them, Alden passed by empty spaces and headed up toward the top of the stands. Hoyu was there, beaming and having an animated video call judging by the gestures he was making. And Lexi was beside him, looking like he hadn't slept or bathed in 3 days and punching the air with his fingers in what Alden could only assume was a rage typing session. "I hope he's writing an email to his most hated enemy and not a teacher or someone he actually likes," Alden thought as he shuffled by a couple of art students wearing bracelets that said Anisidran Forever on them. "What's that about?" Hoyu slid closer to Lexi to make room for Alden. Hoyu's hair was damp, and he was wearing a dark blue long-sleeved shirt with the Scorpius constellation on the front. As Alden sat, Hoyu said, "I have to go, Dad. I have to." They are about to start speaking. "Bye." "You're really coming later, aren't you?" "Okay. Bye." Greater than. He switched to English. "Alden, you're alive. It's true. It was not a ghost texting you for the past day." "Lexi, look. Alden's alive." Lexi didn't look. He only grunted a sound that might have been a greeting. Hoyu shook his head. "He's trying to force his way down to F so that he can go see his parents and Irina. He can't find a ride that doesn't cost a fortune." "We should all be together right now," Lexi said. "Irina is having nightmares. Our apartment is gone. All of our belongings are probably destroyed. If Khan would just help me." "What do you expect him to do, though?" Hoyu asked. "I expect him to help." He suddenly turned to Alden. "You're here. Where were you? Where were both of you? You've both been so vague in your messages." "Never mind. Where are Khan's teeth?" "I gave them back to Khan." "Why?" "Because they're his. It would have been really weird to give them to you." Lexi huffed. "Are they all right?" Alden fired off a mental text to Hoyu. "Is he all right? He seems stressed." Hoyu's smile was placid. "Big protective for family. Crazy now. He is Danger Badger." I put them in an envelope for Con, Alden said slowly. So that he wouldn't lose them. I'm also sure that if they aren't all right, which they totally aren't, they can grow him some new ones. He will still be handsome and able to eat corn on the cob and pronounce fricatives when it's all over. Lexi looked so disappointed in him. Don't glare at people and Cass, Hoyu said. How did you get hurt, Alden? I thought you were somewhere very safe. And then you didn't send messages for an entire day. And now, he bent over to get a better view of the squish boot. Hoyu already knew Alden had been with the ambassador's assistant during the disaster, thanks to Alden texting him with the info Zoraide had shared about the situation on Matadero. Of course he would wonder how it had ended up like this. I think this might be as good a time as any to tell them the basics. I'd rather let them know the important stuff before anyone else in the class starts putting things together. They weren't sitting near any of their classmates, maybe because Lexi was a danger badger. The students around them were from the other programs, and they were all involved in their own conversations. Alden didn't need real privacy to tell a secret that wasn't a real secret. But it was nice that they had the illusion of it that came with being in a large, loud crowd of people who weren't paying you any attention. I got teleported to Punta de la Luna, said Alden. A flyer was there waiting for me, but there was some trouble when I tried to board it. Possibly that made it sound like a mechanical problem, but it was the best he could do. I had to evacuate on foot with an Ertonen. She got hurt, and I was carrying her. So I was slow. And the ocean caught up to us. Hoyu's eyes widened. Lexi's narrowed. Punta de la Luna is gone, said Hoyu. Yep. It's very gone. There's basically nothing left. I made it out of there before it was wiped. We were almost to safety when this enormous water mountain stopped us. HN Tyon Esherdy and HN Tyon Lindata arrived to deal with it. He pulled me out of the water. You were in the water? Said Hoyu. Alden rubbed his cheek. The freshly healed skin was a little sensitive. I was about to drown. Lexi's eyes were slits now. So Esherdy's timing was great. Alden gave them both a thumbs up. And he sent us to a healer. I slept for all of Saturday. And now I am so ready for school to start back. That's good. Hoyu gave him a hesitant thumbs up in return. I think most people are hoping we get the week off, though. Why did you get teleported before everyone else? Asked Lexi. To a plane. I'm sure that's none of our business, said Hoyu. It's fine if it is none of my business, said Lexi. I'm not going to whine about someone else's teleport priority being different than mine. Plenty of people are being so obnoxious about that, even though almost nobody died from being left until last. Don't let Luke hear you say that, Hoyu warned. His parents are fine, but it sounds like Cyril belted himself to the railing of a pedestrian bridge so that he didn't get swept away. Luke's like, he's a drunken moron. It's okay. I just went and got him. But I'm sure he's got feelings about it. I won't say anything about it to Luke. But to Alden, I'm just saying that telling people you got teleported directly to some kind of Artonan salvation plane before everyone else, including Hoyu. Hoyu's face transformed into the picture of innocence. Don't think none of us noticed how fast you disappeared, Lexi said to him. But at least it makes sense in your case. For Alden, I'm telling him that this sounds noteworthy and confusing. He says he wants to know when things he does are noteworthy and confusing. Now he knows, so he won't call more attention to this one. I'm helping him. Thank you, Lexi, said Alden. But I already rode to school on Esherdy's magic flying platform. I think I saw the thing on the news. Hoyu exclaimed. Is it the green one? It's called Nine-Edged Sun, whose own mother forsakes him, said Alden. No, said Lexi. They both looked at him. Why would you ride to school on an Artonan general's flying thing? Lexi whispered. There's no point in whispering, said Alden. People all over Apex saw us on the way here. We slowed down to look at some of their dogs. Are you serious right now? He let me keep it for the day. It's parked outside. Alden held up his hand. I drive it with this cool ring. Hoyu leaned closer to see the green band. Lexi's face was doing things so expressive they almost had sound effects, Ugh. No. Stupid Globey. What is he? Why is he? Why did I let him be my roommate? He told me he had a cat like that might be a dealbreaker, but he never mentioned all the wizards. I really like being roommates with you, Lexi. Lexi drew back from him. Why are you randomly saying that? Do you think it's going to distract me from everything else you said? It just felt necessary. Alden cleared his throat. He lowered his own voice. To answer your question, the Artonans gave me a higher teleportation priority because I have a commendation. Lexi froze. Hoyu had been trying to study the logograms on the ring. He went still, too, but his brown eyes flicked up. They met Alden's through the gap in his splayed fingers. Do you really? He said quietly. Alden nodded. Oh. I thought whatever you went through was probably worse than you said. He glanced down again. It must have been. Lexi slowly thought and started shifting in his seat. What was it for? If you don't mind me, he was interrupted by a sizzling sound. They all looked just in time to see a firework exploding over the floor, orange and blue sparks flying outward toward them. A huge boom rocked the gym. A few people shouted. Everyone else went instantly silent. Instructor Foxbolt was sitting on the bottom bleachers across the gym from Alden, Hoyu, and Lexi. She crossed her legs and leaned back, blowing dramatically on her finger as if she'd shot the firework out of it instead of casting a spell. Thank you, Foxbolt. Principal Celeste stood in the middle of the floor, her face displayed on the projections for all to see. Good morning, everyone, she said. I'm so glad to see you all safe and, mostly, unharmed. It's been a long, hard weekend for all of us. And many of us have more long, hard days ahead. Let's talk about what's happened, and what happens next, and what we expect from y'all as students here at Chilena North High. Chapter 155. Alden bowed his head and stared down at his knuckles while the school observed a moment of silence for the dead. Principal Celeste's speech had started off with the expected sort of thing. Thanks for everyone who'd shown up in person and through interfaces. Eloquent sympathies for students who'd lost places or people they loved. And now this. The posture, the uniform, the sounds of a large group of humans breathing and quietly shifting in their seats. It called up a sliver of memory. The rare and precious kind. A room full of bowed heads, their owners mostly unaware that they were being subjected to a child's critical gaze. His mother's hand tugging him back down into the pew beside her. Alden looking at her in protest, and the silent tilt of her head in return conveying a world of rules and manners. He remembered feeling terribly misunderstood. I was helping. He had explained with righteous indignation when they'd gotten back home that afternoon. I was making sure nobody was cheating. At praying? She asked while she examined the stain on the clip-on tie he'd been wearing. Is this a grass stain? Sweetie, how did you get a grass stain on a necktie? Some people had their eyes open, Alden said darkly. They were playing games on their phones. But they weren't bothering anybody, and you wouldn't have known if you'd had your own eyes closed. Your shirt is clean. I don't understand. Just the tie. I was helping. Warmth, an arm pulling him close. Had she smiled? Kissed him? Had his father been in the room? What had they done after that? He knew from experience that the answers wouldn't come. Trying to force them would only build fantasies that might or might not have happened on that day. And then the moment of silence was over, and Principal Sleyca was talking again, her voice filling the gym. As her tone turned businesslike, the mood shifted away from the somber. It started to feel more like high school. Classes were cancelled tomorrow. All of the ones that could resume on Wednesday would, but they should expect some changes. Alterations in scheduling or course structure were being left up to the individual instructors. Alden was happy they'd be back in class soon. Judging by the number of people groaning dramatically and whispering complaints to their friends, he was in the minority. This meeting will end at 11:30, Principal Celeste said. Bagged lunches will be available outside. Grab one if you're hungry, then follow the schedules that have just been sent to you. Alden opened his with a thought. It was his regular class schedule, compressed into 15 minute periods, with a half-hour-long personal advisement meeting sandwiched in. So we stop by each classroom and hear from the teachers in person about what we'll be doing for the rest of term. Before he finished reading, Principal Sleyca was speaking again. She covered a lot of basic information. Campus dining was being restricted to specific locations and time windows until further notice. The domes and Chilena Circle weren't tourist destinations, and the people living there didn't want thousands of curious students wandering through. Not even if you're volunteering to help. The people living there don't actually need any help you could provide. They just need a quiet place to stay until they can go back to their homes or until they have new ones. The only students who should be visiting the domes here, or anywhere else they've been put up, are those of you who have family staying there. The rest of you go around the perimeter of our new neighborhood. That command led into more discussion of housing. Some people had been letting family and friends stay in their dorm rooms. The government is organizing safe, comfortable housing for everyone who needs it. The domes are being provided by the Triplanets. Other facilities all over Nzidora are being outfitted as residences. Her back was turned to Alden's half of the gym now, so he was watching her on the projection. You might have noticed, but your dorm rooms and apartments aren't that big. Everyone needs a safe space in a community, especially in times like this, and our community is for our students. Your family may visit you here, but they can't live with you. She covered a few more details, then finished off by saying, both Apex and F-City are currently being visited by many more wizards than usual, and the number will likely increase over the coming weeks. Talks about how involved the Triplanetary government should be in our rebuilding process are ongoing. The new culture advisor would be laying out some simple guidelines for you to follow if you happen to run into wizards on campus. But before that, I wish to personally apologize to the entire school on behalf of the talent development program. Alden sat up straighter. What did we do wrong? He had an absurd worry that he had been unwittingly involved with whatever behavior was bad enough to prompt an apology. As I'm sure many of you have heard, a group of our students decided that a nationwide catastrophe was an ideal occasion for experimenting with their powers in a real-world setting. They chose to leave the safety of our campus shelter for an area that had already been evacuated. They thought flooded homes and businesses were their own personal training environment. More people like Liam? Seriously? He had hoped that the Long siblings were unique in their madness. That behavior alone would be enough reason for me to apologize to you. But to make matters worse, a couple of these people chose to wear modified versions of their school uniforms while they gallivanted. She didn't raise her voice, but there was a sharpness to it that was impossible to miss. We expect excellence from all of you, but those in our talent development program should be even more responsible in their use of their abilities. Reporting to Skycia Guard that this group of CNH-trained students needed to be searched for because they had chosen to head towards Sunjao Beach so that they could experiment and play was a low point in my career as an educator. Someone's in trouble. And it sounds like they should be. What kind of selfish, immature? Do you think they're going to expel all the B ranks in the hero program? One of the art students with the Anisidran Forever wristbands whispered to the girl beside her. Do you think what? I don't think it was all of them, was it? I heard it was. What are they talking about? Alden hissed at Hoyu. He pulled up his Hunsky Lodge chat. Was it B ranks who did the bad thing? Hoyu looked intrigued. I don't knowing. I don't have gossip. I want to knowing. Alden, Lexi, do you know who's in trouble? Alden, Lexi? He looked over to see Lexi angry typing again. Hoyu, I think he isn't checking roommate chat. Loot, Hoyu, don't switch to finger texting. It makes you less funny. Loot, hey, Alden. You back at school? Alden, yes. Loot, sweet. I'm watching the speech thing from here. I swear my relatives are growing in number and obnoxiousness. It was torture yesterday, but it's gotten a lot better. He sent a picture of himself sitting in a blanket fort. Elijah was beside him, wearing a t-shirt with a music note print. They were grinning and holding up crackers with meat and cheese. Hoyu, he didn't even try to make it back to Apex. Loot, I did. Just not since the company arrived. Alden suddenly realized that Elijah was in an awkward position. She'd been living in Apex but commuting to school at Franklin High. How is she going to handle that? Loot, a bunch of B's and a few A's are who she's talking about. I think they were mostly second years. I don't know all of them. One was that guy who wears the rings that sound like bells. And there was a girl who turned the school uniform into a cheerleader outfit and painted letter B's on her stomach. And Ella Claire Thomas. So it was them. The viciously competitive, beat-list-obsessed second-year B's. At first, Alden was relieved. He had really enjoyed meeting his fellow B's, but he didn't know any of the second years well yet. Wait. Those lunatics are almost half the active members of my rank club. If they get themselves expelled, do we lose access to the gym and instructor plem? Loot, I've known that figurinist girl was trouble ever since she spent 2 weeks making that giant doll of hers run around campus on all fours. It got faster and faster. I tried to compose a song about how seeing it coming at me down the sidewalks made me feel, but I couldn't hit the right level of creepiness. Alden gave the next speaker his attention. The university's culture advisor was an animated woman with an elegant contract tattoo prominently displayed on the back of one hand. Another important thing to remember about our Artonan visitors is that they are here to work right now, she was saying. I'm sure most of you have seen or spoken to Nzidora's wizard residents in the past when they were going about their regular lives. This is different. The people sent by the true planets to help with the submerger crisis are here to convey the sense of responsibility the wizard class has toward us as Avowed and toward Earth as a resource world. They are responsible, a boy sitting on the level below Alden said quietly. They made the thing and sent it to Earth, right? It's not like a human invented something that dangerous. The culture advisor was still talking. The Artonans will see it as inappropriate to relax or conduct personal business when they've been charged with this purpose. So now isn't the right time to try socializing with them. Lexi stopped typing and looked over at Alden. Alden raised an eyebrow at him in return. Alden, she's referring to people who go out of their way to bother unknown wizards they spot in the street, not me. Some of you might also be tempted to make an appeal on behalf of yourselves or someone you know. To slip in a little showing off with your powers or mention that you've always longed for a chance to serve as a listener for an elite study circle during a mission to the Whispering Villages on the world of the Yellow Smoke. That's an extremely specific example. Hoyu, that was really specific. Loot, 100 Argold says she finds a wizard to take her to the world of the Yellow Smoke before the country's put back together. Hoyu, I barely remember learning about the Whispering Villages in class. But the world of the Yellow Smoke's out there. She'd be gone for months or years. And they'd probably prefer another species. I'll take your bet. Loot, I wasn't serious. Hoyu, you can't take it back now. Alden couldn't recall ever hearing about the Whispering Villages. He texted Bo. It was so nice to be able to do that now. I don't think memorizing all the U.S. state capitals and studying the history of Illinois prepared me well for my future. The culture advisor had finished, and someone from the campus health office had stepped forward to announce that counseling services were available to anyone who needed them, when Bo finally replied, same. I just watched a wizard summon what looked like every flying bug in the rainforest into a briefcase. Now I'm going to go look tragic in front of him and see if he sends me home. As the end of the assembly approached, the final speaker stood. She was wearing the school uniform with a silver frisbee-looking weapon belted over her hip. Her name tag said she was the student council president. She sailed through a speech about solidarity, responsibility, and the CNH spirit and then called for a vote about the uniforms. The student council thought that because of the present hardship, uniforms should be mandatory until the end of the quarter. As a show of unity. And for several other reasons she listed out so fast that Alden barely had time to hear them, much less decide if they were good ones, before the opportunity to vote was flashing in his eyes. Please make the decision selflessly and with the knowledge that you carry on your shoulders the legacy of all who have gone before you and the dreams of all the young people who imagined themselves here at Chelena North one day, she said in a forceful voice. It was clear that she thought only irresponsible, school-spiritless people would reject the idea. Alden clicked no. The uniform looked nice, but he personally believed that times of hardship called for soft, loosely fitted clothing with ample pockets. When the voting concluded, 80% of the school disagreed with him. He sighed. "You didn't vote yes?" Hoyu asked in a surprised voice. "When the going gets tough, I want to wear sweatpants," said Alden. Hoyu looking him up and down pointedly. "My outfit was chosen for me this morning." "You voted yes?" "It's your fault. When I saw you climbing the bleachers earlier I thought you were dressed like that today to be solemn because of the people who died. I thought you were being mature and thoughtful, and I felt bad I hadn't worn mine." The vote was the final item on the agenda. Around them, everyone was standing up. "Lexi," said Alden. "What?" He had never stopped jabbing air throughout the assembly. "I can probably take you down to F if you're sure you want to go. I doubt I can do anything to get you back before classes start on Wednesday, though, so you'd have to take care of that yourself." Lexi looked over. On the green platform, the nine-edged son whose own mother forsakes him. "You can come, too, if you want, Hoyu. It's fun to fly." "That sounds great, but my parents are going to be together this afternoon. I'm meeting up with them. It's the first time I'm going to see Dad face to face since he left for Matadero." He looked so excited. "I get to tell him all about you and Loot and the obstacle course and 100 other things." "That's more important than joyriding down to F," Alden agreed. Lexi looked concerned. "Are you allowed to just fly it all over the place?" "I think so. He told me to take it wherever I wanted." He was more worried about Sleyca than Asherty. But they might not even ask why he was flying the Nonagon around anymore. The assumption would probably be that he was following Asherty's instructions. Lexi hesitated. "I would appreciate it." "Do it," said Hoyu, standing up from his seat. "Do it for all of us who are going to be so jealous that we didn't get to ride a Magic Knight's flying disc." "You called him a knight?" Alden exclaimed. "That's the English translation the systems on the Triplanets usually give for them. I think it sounds more epic. Unless he specifically told you to call him General. Then forget I said anything. He's informal. He told me to drop the title. That's epic, too." Line of asterisks. Outside, it was still sunny, and the bagged lunches were being distributed by uni students. While the three of them waited in a short line to grab theirs, Alden kept turning his head to check on the Nonagon. "If you're nervous, just move it," Hoyu said. "It'll be funny to watch their reactions anyway." "Nobody's actually doing anything bad to it, though," Alden answered. Students kept hopping, climbing, and levitating themselves up the side of the building to look at it. A couple of faculty members were around, and Alden had expected them to put a stop to it. But none of the curious people were being overly risky with their power use, and very few of them were even trying to touch the Nonagon. "People aren't stupid enough to really mess with an important wizard's flying vehicle," Lexi said. "You'd be surprised," thought Alden. "I have to move it anyway. I'm not going to leave it here all by itself while I go across campus to do the class meetings." An idea occurred to him. "Do you guys want to sit on it while we have lunch?" Hoyu had been disappointed he couldn't ride down to F this afternoon. This would make up for it. "There's no need to call attention to your yes," Hoyu exclaimed. "And then you'll take us to class in style." Lexi shut his mouth. A few minutes later, they were away from the crowd, jogging out to the track with bagged lunches in hand. Distance from the audience was necessary if they didn't want people inviting themselves to eat with them. "Call it," said Hoyu, when he noticed Alden stopping and staring at the driving ring. "Show us that alien sky limo." "Just a second, I don't want to make a mistake and crash it." He pressed a logogram on the ring with his thumb and pointed his finger straight down. The green Nonagon rose over the MPE building's row offline. He let it get higher and then pointed it toward them. "Faster," Hoyu advised. "You know someone's going to chase it." The second it reached them, they scrambled aboard, and Alden sent them skyward. He stopped them a few stories above the grassy field in the center of the track, high enough that nobody should feel invited to come up for a visit, low enough that he didn't think he'd get another call from traffic control. Hey, it's textured. Hoyu was bending over near the edge, running his hand across the Nomagon's surface. He was clearly not even a little concerned about Alden's driving. In contrast, Lexi was sitting in the precise center with one hand on Ruther's handle. What would you actually do with the whip if you fell? Alden asked. Lexi blinked and looked down at his own hand before moving it away. You two, grab onto me if we crash. I'll break your fall, said Hoyu, still touching the Nonagon. It feels like a strop waffle. Do you guys know what those are? They are like a skinny waffle biscuit with caramel inside. That checks out, said Alden. The poor son has already been called a cookie this morning. He sat down beside Lexi and opened his lunch bag. He had expected the food to be crummy in the way mass-prepped, depersonalized stuff tended to be. But he was pleased to find that the wrap with the vegan fried chicken tasted pretty good. They didn't talk for a couple of minutes while Alden and Lexi chewed and Hoyu added the contents of condiment packets to his own turkey wrap. Lexi even chews like he's tense, Alden thought as he studied his roommate's features. I'm sorry about your family's apartment. Thanks. Lexi spoke mechanically. But then he looked down at his food, slumped a little, and said, I know a lot of people lost houses. It's only stuff. Everyone keeps saying that. It's true. I didn't give a damn about home when everything was going wrong. Even after I heard Nilama was flooding. Being on the span when it all started. The bridge dropping out from under us like that, water missiles flying around with trucks inside them. I thought things were even worse than they were. I thought, it's fine if the whole island's obliterated. As long as my family is somehow safe. He carefully set his food on the center of the piece of plastic wrap that it had come in, rolled it back up, and then wiped his hands on a napkin. And they are safe. I'm so relieved. But your house isn't just stuff, Hoyu finished for him. It's all the memories that go with it. Kon's in some kind of denial. He keeps saying, some of it's probably fine. No. It's not. It was completely underwater. We might salvage the dishes, I guess. The plastic things? A little bit more if we can manage to find people with the right talents who aren't already booked for the next decade. What did your parents say? Asked Hoyu. Lexi rubbed a hand over his eyes and sighed. To leave the worrying to them. Obviously. What else would they have said? They've been telling me not to worry about anything for the past 2 years, even when a lot of it needs to be worried about. Our parents are on slightly different tracks, said Hoyu. When my father took me out for dinner, right before he left for the cube, we talked about not adding to Mom's worries. Showing her that I could look out for myself here at school and not freaking out if I failed combat assessment. Which I thought I had for a few hours there. He squeezed the last drops out of a mayo packet. Nothing that serious, just taking minor Hoyu business off her plate. I think he underestimates her capacity for micromanagement, though. I sent her a picture of me doing the laundry, and she called afterward to have a 15-minute talk about the amount of detergent I was using. More should be better, right? Alden vividly remembered having the same thought when he was around 9 and trying to wash his own clothes. Only they'd been out of detergent, and he'd opted for dish soap. More had not been better. They ate. Lexi texted Kon to tell him about the ride Alden had offered. Hoyu stood up and walked in a circle around the two of them, getting the 360-degree view of campus and the streets beyond. It's a strange day, isn't it? Everything is so bad and so normal at the same time, he said finally. What do you think happens next? Cleaning up. Building buildings, said Lexi. Years and years of people shouting at each other about what went wrong and whose fault it was. The countries that have been pushing to have their own permanent avowed forces will use this as an excuse to say they should build miniature superhuman armies in case Zedora ever gets wiped out, and the council will probably try to make sure that doesn't happen. And people will keep saying we should never have been allowed to become a self-governing country. Like it was something they actually allowed instead of something the first generation pried away from them. He took a breath. And the true planets will do something or nothing. Honestly, who knows what in the nth dimension they think of all of this? I'm not sure if it's even a big deal to them or if it's a human hiccup. When he fell silent, Hoyu nodded. That summed up about 10% of it. Yeah, Lexi said. I left out a lot of the petty drama. Since you two have been mysteriously absent for a significant amount of time, half the people in school just want to talk about who leveled, whose parents got helloed, and who the system loves best. It's Alden. Hoyu batted his eyes at Alden. The system loves Alden best. Alden snorted. Shut up. Just ask Mitty. When you disappeared from Maricel's flying countertop, he said, why him? About a dozen times in 5 minutes. I offered to take some of you with me. And it sounds like we missed a great time. Oh no. Hoyu's smile fell. What about that guy you did take with you? Was he alright? Marks. He was such a jerk, said Alden. I'm sure he's fine. He left in a huff after screaming at me for being a rabbit globie who didn't care about how it was my duty as a high rank to die before him. That was what he was getting at anyway. You didn't want to die for that guy, Lexi almost sliced up with Ruther. I thought you were a better man. He's good enough for the Artomans, Hoyu, said Lexi. He said it in a light tone that fit in with the conversation. Very chummy by his standards. Alden crumpled up his trash and laid his messenger bag on top of it so that it wouldn't blow off the side of the platform. After a moment, he said, before Principal Celeste started speaking, you were asking me what the commendation was for. I shouldn't have, Lexi replied. I was surprised. But what you do on the true planets is your own business if you want it that way. I do prefer that most of the time. Thagund already took too much. I'm ready for it to stop being something that hits me again and again. I'm ready for it to be like Body Drainer. I want distance from it. I want to be done. I don't want to have to live up to the commendation right now. Like, if I just tell everyone I got stuck on an evil moon and then got rescued, of course they're going to ask stuff. But they mostly feel sorry for me and ask me if I'm alright. That's easier to deal with than having them ask for specific details. Which, if you've been commended, of course they're going to, aren't they? Oh, you did things on the moon? Awesome about things? What were they? And I'm not really up for having my actions microscoped by people who weren't there. He recalled his interview and felt himself frown. I was dreading questions about what had happened on Thagund during the final admissions interview. Everyone talked about how personal and challenging it could get, and I was braced. I thought they might ask to hear the whole story and then do some kind of analysis? And tell me what I'd screwed up. And they'd say exactly the wrong thing, and I'd flip out and do something awful. Like hit Klein with a chair. Not that the hit would land. You really don't have to talk about this, Lexi said hastily. It's fine if you never talk about it. Hoyu had sat down with them again. He nodded in agreement. It was always inevitable that the commendation would be public, said Alden. People did already know about it. The faculty, TC security, my counselors and intake, whoever I've shared my profile with and anyone they talked to. I was just hoping I'd have longer before it became common knowledge. I wanted to get to know you all first. I wanted to do well in gym and prove I fit in with the class. But at this point, it's either tell the truth or make up a lie that will only last a little while longer before the truth comes out. The B-rank rabbit disappearing before all the combat-talented higher ranks was noticeable. So I'll tell our classmates I've got the commendation when they work themselves up to asking me directly. And, if they want details about how I got it, I'll either say I don't want to talk about it or summarize it briefly. I haven't decided. It's a decision in progress. A lot has happened. He drummed his fingers on the nonagon and looked out over the city. He could see north of North Gym from here. They'd already opened back up, with limited hours and services, according to an email he'd gotten this morning. I'll tell you guys about it, though, he said at last. Really, even if I don't summarize, it won't take that long. It's not like I fought a monster or used my skill in some special way. I just kept this kid named Kivby alive. And she kept me alive. And then I went on a very, very long run. Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. All the demon did was touch her leg. Just a touch. It cut her and rotted her and turned her flesh into something it wasn't. I carried her in my arms. I couldn't even use my skill to help her because I was afraid to change targets. I'd never done it without the system, and I wasn't sure I could. She was the first person I saw the chaos hurt like that. She died. They all died. Except for the avowed. And the little girl. Was it better at the lab? It made surviving possible. There were good things that reminded me more good things existed. In other places. Like what? Spiky strawberries. French braiding. Television. I think we'd both have gone nuts without the television. Help came? On day 152. And it was wonderful. And it was awful. Because someone had finally come, but they were much too far away. We waited as long as we could. Even though we both knew it was going to be too long. The car still worked? It did. Can you believe that? It was a wreck. It was full of holes. There was no protection left at all. But it still rolled. I want to know who made it. I don't care what species they are. I want to go to their planet one day and thank them. Your trait works like that? That's actually awesome. Yeah. We'd never have made it if I couldn't run across even the shittiest ground. It was too far. It was almost too far even with the trait. And the drugs. The word chains. The irrigation sticks. I think about it all the time. About how the lifelines were all thin as threads. A dying scientist told me to take some sprinklers in case I needed water. And then, months later, they were one of the things that made living possible. Other avowed would have done it all so much better. So much easier. There are people who could have saved everyone and themselves on the first day. I couldn't. I could only barely do one thing and then barely do the next. Over and over. And the barely never stopped. There was never a moment when I was the best person for the job. I was always lost and wrong and managing by the skin of my teeth. But then. I made it. My body was destroyed. I was destroyed. But I made it. And the best healer I've ever heard of was there to put me back together. And a very spooky old teleportation ritual sent me back to civilization. And you got a commendation. And I got a commendation. For exceptional bravery in the absence of obligation. From Lo Alisart single quote H, the fourth H ention. So that's it. That's most of the story. Are you okay? I think so. I do wish the coat had survived. Chapter 156. Do you think it's alright to step on it? Alden asked, looking down through Ashurti's nonagon to see the top of the forthright building. Thanks to speed, spell, or contraption, someone had managed to cover almost the entire surface of the roof in a boldly colored chalk mural. Scenes of avowed engaged in inspiring acts of courage surrounded the words, "We are in Zedora." It's amazing. Hoyu was leaning so far over the edge that Alden started lowering them just in case he fell off. Who's that running across the water? And there's Popstar on the span. And that Shaper line redirecting the flood down in, oh cool. If the artist can put something like this together so fast, I'm sure they either know how to protect it or they don't care if it gets walked on, said Lexi. The picnic tables for students were all still in place, perched right on top of the drawings, so Alden guessed it was fine. Someone should tell them to draw Maricel and the countertop. And Jeffy doing whatever he did, Hoyu said as he jumped off. He landed on the image of a red halo. The man stood on the deck of a small yacht with his arms raised to lift the vessel into the air. The water pouring from the sides and bottom of the boat became the raindrops that fell onto a woman who aimed a mounted launcher at an unseen target. Hoyu checked the bottoms of his shoes for chalk. Nothing's coming off. After all three of them had dismounted, Alden considered the nonagon. It's so hard to know where to park your fancy car, Hoyu said sympathetically. Such terrible things could happen to, don't. I'll make you guard it. Alden was operating under the belief that as long as he was close enough to the nine-edged son whose own mother forsakes him, Drusiata could keep an eye on both of them. He'd been periodically looking around for her, but he was starting to think she wasn't actually anywhere near him. She might just be monitoring him through a spell or with a magic spike came the size of grain of sand. Maybe if someone approached to bother him, her plan wasn't to leap out and assassinate, but to call that person on the phone and tell them to get lost. While dramatically sharpening some kind of magic veterinary weapon, he directed the nanogun to a stop just above the narrow, windowed enclosure that kept the roof access elevator out of the elements. Hoyu looked at him. I understand why you don't want to make a big deal out of the commendation. And why you don't want people prying into what you went through. But I'm glad you told us about it. He adjusted his Scorpius t-shirt. I don't actually know what I want to say except that I'm glad I know. Lexi pulled the door open and held it for the two of them to walk through. I'm glad, too, he said as Alden passed. I think people knowing about this will be a good thing in a lot of ways. You seem worried about it, but, Hoyu gasped dramatically. Lexi Roberts is going to reveal a social dynamic. Which one will it be? Alden couldn't hold back a grin at that. But, Lexi continued more loudly, your commendation answers the whole, why a rabbit? Question. Thoroughly, Hoyu agreed. Some people already assumed your experience out there, he gestured vaguely at the ceiling, was a big reason you were one of our B ranks. I thought it was your levels and your skill being neat, said Hoyu. I thought it was you being a masochist during our team fight and combat assessment and yanking on rather like pain didn't hurt you. No, said Alden. It definitely hurt. You should let us hit you with it in gym sometime. So you can see. Lexi ignored that. What I'm saying is, for the jerks greater than who will act like those things aren't enough, the commendation should shut them up. I think. Yeah, Hoyu said as the elevator arrived. It's not like they're going to have one. And it shows you've already proven yourself in tough situations, doesn't it? Alden stepped in after them. Maybe. Lute seemed to think that people would be jealous and behave worse because of it. I've been worried people would realize I only got into the program because of the commendation. And they'd be bastards about it. That's why I wanted a few more weeks before the info went wide. So I could kind of prove myself. Lexi frowned. A commendation like that is the proof. Hoyu said confidently. It should carry you even if you do something really dumb. Like turning your uniform into a cheerleader outfit, then hitting yourself in the face with a car. Why would you think you only got in because of the commendation anyway? Lexi asked. We just named a few reasons why you should have. My interview was weird, Alden admitted. Really half-assed. They gave me the blandest topics to discuss. Like why do you like superheroes? Tell us about your goals. Who do you admire? The sorts of things I couldn't screw up because I'd already answered them in the previous interviews. Oh. The frown on Lexi's face deepened. Klein was more honest about it in the end, said Alden. He doesn't like the idea of someone with my class being here because he doesn't see how the program is going to build me into a danger Eddie avowed with nothing but the rabbit skills and spells to choose from. With him saying that and the way everything went. It's pretty obvious the commendation was my acceptance ticket. And they didn't even care what it was for. Hoyu looked miffed. If he said that, it's just him being overly traditional. There's no reason you can't take some rabbit skill that's meant for hairdressing or gardening and turn it into something terrifying. Or at least complementary to the excellent skill you already have. Thanks. It's okay. I do understand what he meant by, it's really not, though. Hoyu protested. And the commendation should have been an acceptance ticket because they cared what it was for. Did they think those things grow on trees? Did they think the Artonans give them out like brute scout badges? He was bristling even more. Alden glanced at Lexi, expecting him to say something to calm Hoyu down. I agree with him, said Lexi. Not about the hairdressing. But even if the class and rank combo was triggering some high-rank hand-wringing about how vulnerable you'll be if everything goes wrong for you, so what? They accept some other people on the assumption that everything will go right. Con's an adjuster with a single spell. He took a complete unknown, and the school accepted him assuming it would become something great. I'm happy it worked out like that for him. But if Con being an S makes more of a difference than you having a commendation for bravery. That irritates me. What about all the organizational skills rabbits have? Said Hoyu. You think magical sorting can't be dangerous? Or clothes folding? The passion in his voice made Alden chuckle. What if you can use a really strong clothes folding skill on clothes with the enemy inside them? Hoyu demanded. Did Klein think of that? Obviously not. You don't have to find me a new skill, said Alden. The one I've got is enough for me to work with right now. I'm just getting started. Line of asterisks. Only half an hour later, Alden was leaving Instructor Marion's classroom in the Wong building with a sigh. His morning science class had already met and been dismissed. They would be officially starting back on Wednesday, as predicted, but without in-person attendance. 2 of the 3 instructors who were lined up for the rest of the quarter were planning to be too busy to commute to campus, so they'd be pre-recording lectures and sending them to everyone. Homework was just going to be reading assignments. Do your studying, and good luck. The final exam next month would be the only in-person meeting. In engaging with the unexpected, Marion had just announced he was changing the class syllabus to make time for everyone to talk about what they'd experienced on Friday night. They had the rest of the week off. He expected them to use the extra days to process everything that had happened and prepare thoughtful conversation topics. He was envisioning a sort of student-led engaging with the disaster course for the rest of term. It would be a good idea, but only if everyone took it seriously, Alden thought as he slipped past the adjuster girl with the summoning abilities and into the busy hallway. She was talking to Andre about a press conference that was coming up this evening. There were rumors that the names of the people involved in the attack were going to be released. How many of these guys actually wanted a serious reflection on their personal disaster experience? Aren't most of them going to slack off and then come to class with some low-hanging drama topics, like usual, so that we can all argue? A couple of them had had very serious looks on their faces, though. Most had been on campus, safely tucked in the gym during the danger, but Anzidora was a small world. Everyone who hadn't lost something themselves at least knew somebody who had. Marion's hopes that they'd all be mature conversationalists might come true. Alden would figure out what he was going to talk about. But for now, he was mentally shifting to plan for a class schedule that wouldn't start until 11 o'clock in the morning for the rest of the week. And that was assuming Instructor Rao kept the art tone and conversation class the same. That will give me plenty of time to make the commute from Matadero at least. Yes. I've heard the same rumors, but only here at school. Andre's accent caught Alden's attention and he turned. The Polish boy was still talking to the adjuster. He had his cudgel sticking out of the top of his backpack. It looked like it was peeking over his shoulder. They haven't told you anything at home? The girl asked. Your relatives don't talk about it, or they don't share council news with me. Excuse me. I have to go to my next class. He slid past her and started toward Alden. We've made eye contact now. Might as well wait on him. Alden was curious about what had happened with the bees who'd run off during the emergency anyway, and Andre would probably know. He was heavily involved with the rank club. He'd invited Alden to the study groups and dinners more than once. Alden hadn't taken him up on those offers yet because he always seemed to have plenty of other things to fill his time. The other bees in the hero program seemed to be a little more rank-insular than he and Max were. It was still early days, so Alden hadn't had time to figure out exactly what kind of relationships the students in more advanced groups had with each other. But there was obviously enough bad blood going around that Andre, who seemed like an easy person to get along with, preferred the B-list crew to most of his own combat classmates. Hi, said Alden as the other boy joined him and they started down the hall for the exit. You're hurt. Andre glanced down at his boot. You weren't. Do not tell me if you were. Don't incriminate yourself. Greater than, the last was said in a whisper. Alden shook his head. I didn't go out with Francis, Bibi, and whoever else was being stupid. I was on the other side of Apex. And I was trying like hell to get to safety, not run away from it. Oh. Andre looked relieved. That is so good. I am beginning to be worried that there are not enough bees who aren't crazy at this school. When they stepped outside, Alden's eyes went immediately to a bushy tree that stood on the other side of the path. A group of people were standing beneath it, pointing up. "You had trouble getting to a shelter?" Andre's tone turned sympathetic. "You were left because you're a rabbit." "Something slightly different than that," said Alden. "Anyway, did you seriously think I might have been with that group? And that I somehow escaped from whoever went to fetch them? I don't know how I'd get away from trained members of Sleyca. I'm sure they caught everyone involved." "No, they missed Sammy," Andre replied. But she felt guilty when everyone else got in trouble, and she decided to confess. Probably a very good thing for the rest of them. Sammy? There was nobody he'd met in the B-list with that name. "She's an S." She went along for some reason. Andre lowered his voice. "She's probably too talented to expel. So maybe the others will be okay. It wouldn't be fair to expel just the Bs." Alden agreed that it wouldn't be fair to expel all the Bs. But his sympathy level for danger chasers had recently hit a new low. "What were they thinking?" he asked. "Do you know?" Andre turned his eyes skyward. Ella Clara was thinking she has only earned 4 levels this year, and even that is not fast enough for her. The others were probably thinking, "Let's follow Ella Clara and see what she does." 4 levels was impressive. But none of the rest of it was. "I just don't want B-list gym time to be cancelled." "I think it will be," said Andre. "At least for a couple of weeks." An angry sound escaped Alden's throat before he could stop it. Andre lifted his pale eyebrows. Instructor Plim is a powerful shaper of water. Alden had been about to say something scathing about people who ruined the educational opportunities of others, but his mouth snapped shut at that. "That's right. She's probably busy. The wizards are still using shapers of water to overwhelm the submergers, I heard on the news. It is more important than our club." "I know that," Alden said. "I just forgot she was the water shaper temporarily." He pressed his finger to the green ring and pointed it at the ground. There was a rustling sound and a yelp as one stray teenager fell out of the bottom of the tree and one 9-edged son emerged from the top. Andre stared while Alden beckoned his ride. "Do you want to come with me?" Alden asked. "No, greater than," Andre said, turning his head to examine the tree again like he thought another one might pop out. "I can walk." Greater than. Line of asterisks. Heading to the convo class meeting, Loot, Alden texted as he hurried up the stairs behind a girl with canary yellow hair. She was scattering loads of Anisidran Forever stickers on every landing. That slogan seems to be taking hold fast, he thought, leaping over some of the stickers and landing on his squish boot so hard that his ankle actually complained for the first time since he'd started wearing the thing. Shit. It was easy to forget he was injured when walking didn't hurt. And he'd gotten so used to the boot already that the lack of feedback from the foot trapped inside it no longer called his attention. Better slow down. "Are you logging into the class online or something?" he asked Loot. "I'm supposed to be," Loot answered. "Rao hasn't sent the call-in link though. Guess she's going to be late like usual." A second later, he video called Alden. He was still sitting in the blanket fort, -1 F-rank rabbit girl. Elijah had to head to Franklin, he said, plopping himself back onto a mound of mismatched pillows and sofa cushions. They don't have classes today, but she does have some stuff to take care of this afternoon. It'll probably take her ages to get there with the way travel's going right now. How are things? Okay, Alden said automatically. Then, he paused with one hand on the banister. He did have a little bit of unwanted tension in his chest. It had been there ever since he had told the guys about Thegund. Just leftovers. Telling hadn't been that hard. But deciding it was time to and wondering about what they'd think had been. "I'm good," he said. "I told Lexi and Hoyu about it. The thing I told you about on the day we had our big word chain learning session." "What did they say?" Loot was walking around Snack Cracker across the backs of his fingers the way some people did coins. At a very high rate of speed. Without it crumbling. "I wonder if I can do that," said Alden. "They said that? About getting an award like yours? They are even more ambitious than I realized." Has it occurred to you hero-brain people that you're not immort? No. I meant I wanted to do what you're doing with the cracker. Hoyu and Lexi were great about it. Oh. Luke popped his toy in his mouth and crunched it. Without bothering to swallow, he said, I told you. Didn't I? Hoyu's a classy guy. And Lexi's got class, too. He just hides it underneath his personality. It's nice to have it out in the open with you three, Alden said, continuing his ascent. And everything else is fine. School exists. Lots of happy alive people here. A minute later, he reached the classroom, grabbed an ass-abused cushion for the hell of it, and knelt to wait for Instructor Rao. Almost the whole class was present. Most people had been on campus on Friday night, so they hadn't gotten stuck in. The volume of the chatter increased as time passed, and Alden started to wonder if the instructor was going to make an appearance at all. She's 10 minutes late to a meeting that only lasts 15, Luke pointed out. If something had happened to her, the school would have told us, wouldn't they? A painted wooden ball smacked the floor at the edge of Alden's cushion. The object was someone's craft project, and a group of students had been tossing it back and forth for a while now, trying out different tricks on it with their magic. This time, when it impacted, it didn't make the sharp sound he would have expected from wood on wood. And it bounced up and over him like it was made of rubber. Hey, is that a property transfer spell? I didn't know you had that. The boy to his left called jovially to the thrower as he stepped forward to catch it and toss it back to the other side of the room. The class had gotten so loud that Alden was honestly surprised none of the faculty members from the neighboring rooms had come in to tell them all to knock it off. Hey, knock it off. A girl sitting in the back corner said. I guess she's thinking the same thing. About half of the students turned to look at her. People died, she said severely. We shouldn't be playing around today. She's right, a guy agreed. Let's show some respect. Like Deacon in the uniform. Alden raised a hand and waved. If you don't mind, it's Alden. Not Dake. Something bad happening doesn't mean we're all obligated to be miserable 24/7. Greater than. Yeah, some girl acted like I was a traitor for asking her to turn the common room television to anything but the news last night. But we've all been watching the news for 2 days straight. My family is living in a dome. I want to be able to sit down for an hour with my friends and not think about the attackers and the fact that the place where I grew up is ruined. They started bickering, Alden failed to get another word in, and Luke shook his head sadly. You're Deacon forever now. Yeah, probably. I'm taking Lexi and Con down to F later. Do you want me to pick you up while I'm there? We're planning to leave as soon as we're all done with our, hey, little kids. Someone suddenly shouted over all the other voices in the room. Alden and everyone else looked up to see a heavily freckled girl in a university t-shirt and shorts strolling into the room, flip-flops slapping her heels. She cracked her chewing gum and looked around at them all. Sorry I'm late, she said. But I was asleep until 20 minutes ago when the head of the language department called to ask if I'd take this job. Been doing cleanup with the Uni Volunteer Corps. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your teacher until the end of the quarter. She made finger pistols at them. I like her, said Lute. Is Instructor Rao all right? Someone asked. Oh my gosh, she didn't. She's fine, said Kelly. I mean, her priorities are a little. But she's healthy as far as I know. She resigned. She's chasing her dreams and giving up on teaching. Her dreams. Alden wondered. He wasn't the only person wearing a confused expression. Sue. Kelly interlaced her fingers and stretched her arms over her head. I'll just tell you if you don't already know. Everyone in uni's gossiping about it anyway. Instructor Rao's one of those people who wants to get off of this rock. She wants to live on one of the Artonas and not come back. But she doesn't get summoned a lot, so she's taking her shot now by trying to find a wizard who wants to carry her back home with them. Nobody said anything for a few seconds, and then everyone started talking or laughing at once. She wants to be the poacher lady who gets together with the farmers. Maybe she just wants to work for them full-time. If they find out how checked out she is as a teacher, they'll never let her near one of their planets. I can't believe she's abandoning the school in the middle of a crisis. Go get 'em, Rao. She's doing exactly what the culture advisor just told us all not to do. There's a guy in my parents' apartment building who's trying the same thing. Alden was busy thinking about how crazy it was to give up a stable job to chase after an extraterrestrial lifestyle that was not at all a sure thing. Well, it's less crazy if you Anasidaran. Losing a teaching job and not being hired back wasn't as big a deal if you were guaranteed a decent quality of life even without the work. And there were a lot of wizards running around. But he'd gotten the impression most of them weren't at all what Rao was banking on. On the video floating in front of him, Luke looked amused. This is kind of funny, but it seems like a terrible choice on her part. I'm pretty sure most of the new wizards who are here right now don't even have summoning rights for our species, Alden texted him. I think a lot of them are here to prove they deserve those rights. Probably there are a few who could invite her to come live on the True Planets, but how's she even going to know which ones they are? Kelly clapped her hands together. All right. Everyone turn your Webtoon and translation off real quick for me. We're having class? Someone asked. There are only a few minutes left. I said turn them off. Or you fail. A couple of people looked petrified. Kelly laughed. Man, maybe I do want to be a teacher. Okay, kids. System not helping you anymore? Good. Here we go. I'm going to tell you all a serious, sad story about 3 Artonans. She cleared her throat and started speaking in Artonan, in a low and serious voice. The 3 of us pass now along a high and narrow branch. Though our hands cannot be joined, I see your braid before me. I hear her steps behind me. I am like a river in it. The you make for me will keep me on my way. Let us go now and thrust the stones of fruit we already digested into the nostrils of that guy over there. Alden burst out laughing, which ended up being awkward because everyone else was nodding along in sympathy, apparently taking her at her word that the story was serious. Only one of you? Kelly said in a depressed voice, swapping languages. Man, you guys suck. When did the high school language classes get so lax? Uniformed kid with good cushion manners, summarize what I just said in Artonan, then translate it for the room. Oh. Really? Choppity chop, said Kelly. Alden summarized then translated it, guessing that the words he hadn't understood were reverbed and some version of path. A few people guffawed, including Lute. One boy looked offended for some reason. You said it was a sad story. It was sad for the nostrils, Kelly answered with a shrug. She looked at Alden. And your honor, are you using any disallowed spells or recorders or anything to make you better at the language? No, someone answered before Alden could. He actually speaks Artonan already. Yeah, Alden's the moon rabbit. Kelly gave them all a blank look. Alden opened his mouth to explain himself. He was stuck on a moon, someone else offered. Oh, said Kelly. That kid. Wow. Nice to have you back on Earth. He's got one of the General's flying devices. He's just riding around campus on it. What? Seriously? I heard someone did. It was him? Every eye in the room turned to him. Alden stiffened on his cushion and felt a polite smile fix itself on his face. That is interesting. Kelly tilted her head as she regarded him. But not relevant to conversation class. Alden, right? You can neglect to show up for the rest of term. Come for your final, and we'll make it your grade. People gasped like she'd just pulled a ribbon-wrap pony out of her pocket. What about the rest of us? Give us another chance. That's not fair. It is fair, said Kelly. She swept both hands toward Alden. This person speaks Artonan. She waved her arms to indicate the rest of them. These people do not. I'm going to be one of the fairest teachers you've ever met. Can't I still come to class if I want to? Alden asked. Luke groaned. Take the win and run, you fool. You don't like me as a convo partner? This was the class where he'd been socializing with Luke and learning his word chains. Of course it will probably be different with a teacher who actually seems to care about student progress on an individual level. Kelly's eyes scanned him. I guess the vibes you're giving off are accurate. I don't need you. shouted Lute from inside his blanket fort. "Run. Be free." "Sure. Show up if you want," said Kelly. "Or not. But I figure I should spend most of my time focusing on the people who are actually in need of instruction. To the rest of you, I'm excited. Pumped. See you all on Wednesday. Don't be late." Line of asterisks. "What are you doing next?" Lute asked while Alden stood on the roof of Forthright, calling the Nonagon to him. "Going to the administrative building. For the personal advisement." "What personal advisement?" Lute's fingers swiped through the air. "Balls. Did I miss something? I wasn't extraordinarily focused when I first got the schedule. At least not on the schedule. No, I don't see that on mine." Alden frowned as he tossed his bag onto the flying platform and then jumped aboard to join it. "I didn't mention it to Lexi and Hoyu. I was more focused on all the other stuff, too. Do you think it's only me? That would be odd." "Maybe it's just because I'm not on campus," said Lute. "You never said if you want me to pick you up this afternoon or not." "I do," said Lute. "Cyril's apartment's been cleared, so I don't need to stay here to give him an in into the Villa property and buffer him. And I really don't want to hang out with him for much longer." While drunk and nearly hypothermic, he shoved my head under his armpit and told me he didn't want someone named Polly to talk shit about me. As far as apologies go, that might be the best I could have hoped for, but I'm still ready for some peace and quiet. "What about your mom?" thought Alden. But he changed his mind before he asked the question. "What about your family's boat?" he asked instead. Random question. Alden had actually been wondering because of Kabir's story about being rescued from Libra. Almost by accident, he had thus far avoided telling his roommates he was staying at Matadero. It felt like the kind of thing they could all figure out if they tried, but conversation just hadn't gone there yet. And there had been so much other ground to cover. "Libra survived," said Lute. "I heard it was on the other side of Matadero when everything happened. That submerger stuff almost all headed in the opposite direction. The mansion did get flooded, but if the Grand Witch doesn't have some poor avowed locked up in there casting drying spells already, I'll be shocked." Alden lifted off the roof and headed toward his next stop. "You look so proud of yourself," Lute said. "No, I don't. You look like you're enjoying the breeze in your hair as you soar above. I've decided that if I'm going to be the caretaker of this fine flying Forsaken Sun, I'm going to appreciate it. What else is there to do?" Lute looked thoughtful. "A barrel roll." "Yes. I see you've thought of it already." Alden had a couple of minutes to spare, so he didn't rush his flight toward the gray-shingled roof of the admin building. He watched Lute shake cracker crumbs off one of the cushions in his fort. There was a question he wanted to ask, but he felt like he needed to be careful how he asked. At Benjamin Villa's birthday party, Lute had offered to give Alden a free piece of mind. But Alden didn't think free meant free for Lute, and he didn't want to lean on a friendship that was only a few weeks old with something like, "Will you take a 3-hour-long dose of bad emotions for me?" Huh? If Bo was here and he didn't hate using his powers, how would he interact with something like that? "Hey man," he said, trying to keep his voice casual, "I've been wondering. What kind of word chains do you hate paying back the most? Like, which ones absolutely suck? Please say you hate something physical." "Something physical." "The gloss," Lute said dryly. He pointed at his false eye, then cackled at the look that appeared on Alden's face. "This reminds me of our first class together," Lute crowed. "The eye jokes never get old. Your sense of humor is so wrong. You walked into it." Alden groaned. "The thing about paying back debts is it's so situational," said Lute. "Anything that has two potentially positive halves is good. Anything I can sleep off is okay. It changes when you start talking about stronger chains, too. A low-level skin sensitivity chain can be fine on both halves. But as the power increases it becomes problematic. In general, the negative sides of mental improvement chains are tough, of course, and, damn it. It would have been perfect if Lute had confessed that he loathed paying off strength chains or something like that. Alden could have offered to swap debts. but nobody's going to tell me they like the word chain that makes them feel nervous, depressed, or afraid. It was crazy of me to ask anyway. I'll pay for my own decisions. He had the whole day off tomorrow, and he could use it to pay off one of the peace of minds. He'd lie in his hospital bed and have a nice anxiety attack with his non-judgmental snake friend. Better to do it when his only roommate was a reptile. Right now I'm kind of worried about myself, Lute was saying. I might have been just a tad over the top with my usage. Do you think we get in trouble for breaking public property if it was during an emergency and for a righteous cause? Because Suddenly, Lute's expression changed. He got onto his feet, crouching so that his head didn't hit the blanket above him. Is something wrong? Nah, said Lute, his face distracted. I mean, probably not. Roman's mom just yelled something about Alaya murdering Orpheus in public, but she is a bit of an alarmist. Do you need to go? No. It's fine. I don't care what they're all doing. I worried the Grand Witch would appear and bother me while I was here, but she hasn't been around. She hasn't been on television either. I would have expected to see her all over the place, sticking her face in front of cameras for the public show. He cocked his head. Yeah. There we go. She's live streaming herself now. The family is all dutifully tuning in. She's probably delivering sympathies and gently reminding everyone that she has her love for Isidora tattooed over whatever organ pumps your blood when you're an evil creature of the darkness masquerading as a human. I thought Orpheus was your cousin with the personal struggles. That is such a sweet way of saying he's been willfully obliterating his own mind and body since he was barely older than us. Every time he gets healed up, he goes right back to it. Does Alaya usually stream with him? Alden asked, trying to fit the new intel into his increasingly convoluted mental map of vulgar relationships. No. She doesn't. Lute smiled. Okay. Now I'm a little too curious not to look. Let's see what the Grand Witch is scheming. I'll send you a link. When it arrived, Alden opened it with a thought, planning to just take a quick glimpse before his advisement session. Alaya Vulra stood on a wharf with a container crane in the background. She wore a black sweater and a single strand of pearls. Her blonde hair was in a tight, high ponytail, and the look on her face was so piercing it was almost as if she could see across space to meet every viewer's eyes with her own. Isidora, she said, her rich voice devoid of its usual note of cheer, we are facing one of our more difficult trials now, aren't we? So many of you have been so brave, and I won't betray that bravery with cowardice. Even if it costs me a piece of my own heart. She looked down, and the camera shifted to show a clearer view of the thin, dark-haired man who sat sobbing at her feet. The submerger was in my care. And it was stolen and sold to those who ultimately caused all of this tragedy by my own blood. She held a hand to her chest. I cannot make amends. All I can offer you is my confession. Tope continued,